Hey there. Ready to dive into something a lot of people would rather avoid.
Okay.
We're tackling disaster preparedness today,
Okay.
and we've got this awesome guide designed for students.
Great.
But honestly, the stuff in here is relevant to everyone, no matter how old you are or how much experience you've got.
You're absolutely right. Disasters, they don't discriminate. And being prepared can make all the difference in the world when it comes to safety and peace of mind.
Okay, so the guide starts off talking about common natural disasters. And I have to say, I was kind of surprised by some of them. Like, I always thought dust storms were just like a movie thing. Something you see in old Westerns, not something I actually need to worry about in real life.
Huh. It's interesting, isn't it, how pop culture shapes our perceptions of risk. But dust storms are a very real and serious hazard in certain parts of the U.S.,
Yeah.
particularly in arid and semi-arid regions. And they're not just dramatic dust clouds either. We're talking zero visibility, dangerous driving conditions, and you can have serious respiratory issues.
Wow, that's intense. It makes me realize how much location plays into what kinds of disasters we need to prepare for. Speaking of location, the guide also mentions avalanches, which I usually associate with, mountainous regions like the Alps.
And you're right, avalanches are more common in those areas, but they can happen in parts of the U.S. as well. Anywhere with steep slopes and heavy snowfall. The Rockies, the Cascades, even the Sierra Nevada all have avalanche risk. What's really interesting is how these events are triggered. It's not just about the amount of snow. It's about the layers, within the snowpack, the temperature, and even the angle of the slope.
So it's a whole science unto itself.
It is.
This is making me realize how little I actually know about the forces of nature that are at play, like right in my own backyard.
Right.
Okay, so we've got a better sense of the types of disasters that could happen, but what do we actually do about it? The guide has this whole section on preparedness steps, but some of them seem almost too simple, like stay calm. Isn't that a given in an emergency?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But research shows that even the most level-headed person can experience something called cognitive tunneling under extreme stress. Basically what happens is your brain hyper-focuses on one thing and it blocks out other crucial information and hinders your ability to make rational decisions.
So staying calm isn't just about keeping your cool.
Right?
It's about literally keeping your brain functioning properly.
Exactly.
That's a game changer. The guide also talks about knowing your risk, which sounds kind of vague to me.
Well, it's actually one of the most important steps because it's about moving beyond general advice and getting hyper-local. It's about understanding the specific hazards you face based on where you live and tailoring your preparations accordingly. For example, if you live in a hurricane-prone area, knowing your evacuation zone and route isn't enough. You need to understand the different hurricane categories,
Okay.
the potential storm surge in your area, and even the elevation of your property.
So it's about taking that general knowledge and applying it to your specific circumstances.
Makes sense. Now let's talk about the fun stuff, the disaster supply kit. I love how this guide gets into the nitty-gritty, water, food, first aid kit. Those are all standard. But then it mentions a whistle. Why is that so crucial?
Well, that's where the whole MacGyver element of preparedness comes in. It's about thinking resourcefully and recognizing the power of, seemingly simple tools. A whistle is small, it's lightweight, but that high-pitched sound can travel much farther than your voice.
Oh, interesting.
Especially in a chaotic environment. Imagine being trapped under debris after an earthquake.
Right.
A whistle could be your lifeline.
Okay, I'm starting to see the value in thinking outside the box. What other unexpected but essential items does the guide recommend?
Well, one that often gets overlooked is a hand crank weather radio.
Yeah.
In a disaster, power outages are common. You might not have access to your phone or the internet.
Yeah, that's true. A hand crank radio allows you to stay informed about weather conditions, evacuation orders, and other vital information without relying on external power sources.
That's a great point. Information is power, especially in a crisis. The guide also stresses the importance of having cash on hand. Why is that? I mean, doesn't everyone use credit cards these days?
Well, in an emergency, credit card systems and ATMs can go down. Having a stash of cash, even small bills, can allow you to purchase essential supplies or services if other payment methods are unavailable.
So it's like a backup system for your finances. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the practicalities of prepping, but this guide doesn't shy away from the emotional side of things either. It talks about planning for everyone in the household. And I have to admit, I hadn't really considered the specific needs of like older adults or
Right.
people with disabilities.
It's a crucial aspect of preparedness that often gets overlooked. We need to remember that disasters can disproportionately impact vulnerable populations. For older adults, it's about ensuring they have access to medications, assistive devices, and support networks. For people with disabilities, it's about addressing their specific needs and ensuring they have the assistance they need during an evacuation or if they need to shelter in place.
And the guide even mentions pets.
Right.
It's easy to forget about our furry friends in the midst of chaos.
Absolutely. Having a plan for their care, including food, water, and even copies of their vaccination records, can make a huge difference in their well-being during and after a disaster.
This is making me realize how much more there is to preparedness than just stocking up on supplies. It's about thinking holistically and planning for the needs of everyone in your care. Okay, so we've covered the before aspect of preparedness, but what about the after? I'm curious to learn more about the guide's recommendations for post-disaster actions.
That's actually a great segue into a topic that's often neglected, the importance of documentation and recovery.
Let's dive into that. I'm all ears.
Yeah, it's understandable to focus on those immediate needs right after a disaster, but overlooking these crucial steps can have, long-term consequences.
Yeah.
Documenting damage might seem tedious,
Right.
but it's essential for filing insurance claims and receiving assistance. Take photos, videos of everything, keep a detailed log of expenses, and make sure you understand your insurance policy and what it covers.
It sounds like having those conversations beforehand is key. Kind of like measure twice, cut once, but for like disaster prep.
Exactly. It's about being proactive rather than reactive. The guide also emphasizes the importance of connecting with your community after a disaster.
Right.
It's easy to feel isolated and overwhelmed during these times, but reaching out to neighbors, friends, and family can provide really valuable support.
There's that human element again, right? It's not just about physical survival.
Yeah.
It's about those social and emotional support systems that help us get through tough times. The guide also delves into the world of disaster relief organizations, and honestly, I had no idea how many different groups are out there doing amazing work.
Right.
I mean, I know about FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, but they seem like more of a reactive force coming in after a disaster is already struck.
FEMA does play a critical role in coordinating large-scale disaster response efforts.
Yeah.
But you're right, their focus is primarily on that immediate relief and recovery. What's fascinating is that there's a whole ecosystem of organizations working on different aspects of disaster management,
Okay.
from preparedness and mitigation to long-term community development.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me some examples.
We'll take the American Red Cross, for instance.
Okay.
Most people associate them with blood drives, but they're also a powerhouse when it comes to disaster relief,
Yeah.
providing shelter, food, and other essential services to those affected.
So they're kind of like the Swiss Army knife of disaster relief, handling multiple needs at once.
Exactly. Then you have organizations like the International Association of Emergency Managers, or IAEM,
Okay.
who focus on professional development and best practices in the field. They're all about raising the bar for disaster preparedness and response,
Oh, wow.
ensuring that emergency managers have the knowledge and skills they need to effectively lead their communities through crises.
So it's like the behind-the-scenes work that makes everything run smoothly.
Right.
What other groups stand out to you?
Well, one that I find particularly inspiring is the Convoy of Hope. They're a faith-based organization, and they do incredible work providing disaster relief, but they also go beyond that with community development programs. They focus on building resilience long before a disaster strikes,
Oh, that's cool.
empowering communities to prepare for and respond to challenges.
That's so cool. I love that proactive approach. It's like they're not just putting out fires.
Right.
They're preventing them from happening in the first place.
And it's not just about these big national organizations. Local and state emergency management agencies play a vital role as well. They're often the first responders on the ground,
Right.
and they have that local knowledge and relationships to effectively coordinate relief efforts.
It's like a multi-layered system of support, each level playing its part. The guide also mentions that volunteering is a great way to get involved. And I have to admit, I've always thought about donating to disaster relief, but I never really considered, volunteering my time.
Oh, that's a common misconception. Many people think disaster relief is all about professionals,
Right?
but volunteers are essential to the process.
Okay.
Whether it's staffing shelters, distributing supplies, or simply offering a listening ear, volunteers are the backbone of many relief efforts.
That's like that saying, many hands make light work.
Yeah.
Even small acts of service can make a huge difference in someone's life.
And think about it, in the face of a disaster,
Yeah.
that sense of community, that shared purpose can be incredibly powerful. It can help us overcome fear, build resilience, and emerge from a crisis stronger than before.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Okay, we've talked a lot about the practicalities of preparedness, the supplies, the organizations, the action steps. But what about the emotional side of things?
Yeah.
The guide touches on the importance of mental health, and I think that's something we need to explore further.
Absolutely. Disasters can be incredibly traumatic experiences, and it's crucial to acknowledge the mental and emotional toll they can take.
Let's dive into that. What specific recommendations does the guide offer?
Well, the guide stresses the importance of seeking support, from friends, family, or mental health professionals. If needed, it's okay to not be okay, and reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
I think there's still like a stigma around mental health, especially in the context of disasters. We tend to focus on the physical injuries and rebuilding, but those emotional scars can run really deep.
Absolutely. And it's not just about coping with the aftermath. Even the anticipation of a disaster can trigger anxiety and stress. For example, if you live in an area prone to wildfires, the smell of smoke or the sight of helicopters can bring back those traumatic memories and trigger a stress response.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like your body's remembering the past and preparing for the worst, even if the threat isn't immediate. I'm curious, what are some practical tips the guide offers for managing these emotional responses?
One of the key recommendations is to have a plan in place for managing stress and anxiety even before a disaster strikes.
Okay.
This could involve things like practicing relaxation techniques, building a support network, or identifying coping mechanisms that work for you.
So it's like having a mental health toolkit ready to go,
Right.
just like you have a physical preparedness kit.
Exactly.
I love that analogy. It makes it seem less daunting, more like a skill you can develop over time.
And remember, everyone copes differently. What works for one person might not work for another. The important thing is to find what helps you manage stress and build resilience.
This whole conversation has really shifted my perspective on disaster preparedness. I used to think it was all about having the right gear, knowing the evacuation routes, but it's so much more than that. It's about understanding the risks, planning ahead, building community connections, and taking care of your mental and emotional well-being.
It's about being proactive, resourceful, and resilient qualities that benefit us not just in times of crisis, but in everyday life as well.
Yeah. It's almost like a philosophy for living, a way of approaching challenges with a sense of preparedness and empowerment. I like that. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the unexpected nature of disasters, the importance of staying calm and knowing your risk,
Right.
the essential elements of a disaster supply kit, the incredible work being done by relief organizations, and the critical role of mental health. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final question to ponder. If you could add one thing to your disaster kit that nobody else would think of, what would it be?
That's a great question. I think I would pack a small board game or a deck of cards. In a prolonged disaster situation when the power's out and routines are disrupted, having a way to unwind, connect with others, and kind of escape from the stress can be incredibly valuable.
I love that. It speaks to the importance of not just surviving a disaster, but thriving in the face of it, finding moments of joy and connection, even amidst the chaos.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope, resilience, and the human spirit's ability to adapt and overcome.
Well said. Okay, deep divers, that's a wrap for today's deep dive. We hope you gained some valuable insights, felt a little more empowered, and maybe even had a few aha moments along the way. Remember, knowledge is power and preparation is key. Stay curious, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.